Here is what nobody tells you when you are rebuilding after divorce. The problem was never what you were building, it was what you were building on. You can do everything right, make better choices, grow in your faith, work on yourself, become someone genuinely different from who you were before, and still find that the foundation under it is the same unstable ground it has always been. Because you can change what you are building without ever examining what it is anchored in. A few weeks ago, I gave a speech to a room full of high achieving women about exactly this. And I knew I had to bring it here because the woman I was speaking to in that room, she was you. I am Katie Ann, and this is Beyond Believing. Here's what I've learned about having a microphone. It is a responsibility because the wrong message delivered with the right confidence can keep people stuck for years. So today, I am not going to give you a strategy. I am going to give you something that will make every strategy you already have something you actually live, and not just something that's a good idea. Simon Sinek built an entire brand on one of the most watched TED Talks in history. It's called Start With Why. I'm sure you've heard of it. And he's right, your why matters. But here's what that conversation doesn't actually finish. Your why is only as stable as what you believe about yourself. And if that foundation is shaken, your why shifts with every hard season, with every loss, with every version of you that got shaken. Now, I want to speak to something I think is quietly true for a lot of the women listening right now. You are driven. You are capable. You are building something real. And privately, if you're really honest, there are moments where you feel like you are chasing a version of yourself you can never quite catch. Like she's just ahead of you, just around the corner. And if you just heal one more thing, do one more hard thing, get one more season behind you, maybe then you'll finally feel like her. That is not a healing problem. That is an identity problem. When you are deceived about who you are, you will spend your entire life exhausted chasing after becoming her. So here is the question I want to plant before we go any further. Who do you actually believe that you are? Not who do you say you are, not what you tell people at church, not the identity you perform when you are holding it all together, but who do you actually believe that you are? I grew up in a home shaped by divorce, conflict, contention, divisiveness. And when you grow up in a home like that, where both of your parents are, according to the other, terrible people, and you are half of each of them, you start to believe something. You start to believe that you must be all of the terrible things spoken about each of them. I inherited their traits, their patterns, their wounds, and I spent most of my life unknowingly repeating them, deeply shaped by identities I had accepted without ever questioning where they came from. And when my mom started dating and eventually remarried, I learned something else. I learned that I was an object for men's desires and that I was not worth protecting. Now, I did all of the right things spiritually. I was determined to make different choices than my parents. I was convinced I would not repeat the same experience for my children. And I still went through my own divorce. I still felt completely lost, still felt unworthy of protection, still felt unworthy of genuine love. The moment everything shifted for me wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a program. It wasn't even a rebrand. It was a question. In Matthew 16:15, Jesus turns to his disciples and he asks, but who do you say that I am? Now, Jesus wasn't asking because he didn't know. He was establishing something. Identity must be spoken, declared, and settled. And Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "On this rock, on this declaration, I will build." I had spent my whole life accepting whatever others told me about myself. I thought I knew God, but I had never actually asked him what he said about me. So I did have roots. They were just planted in the wrong ground. And here's what I know now. This isn't just my story. This is the architecture of every woman who has ever felt like her roots are growing, but not feeling strong. Because what you build, your relationships, your home, your life, the woman you are becoming, is only ever as stable as the roots underneath it. There's a parable. And even if you didn't grow up in the church, the imagery is going to land here because it illustrates this perfectly. It's in Matthew 13, the parable of the sower. It says, a farmer goes out to sow seed, and the seeds fall on different kinds of ground. Some seeds fall on the path, and it never even takes root. Some seeds fall on rocky ground. It shoots up really fast and looks great, but the moment the sun gets hot, it withers and dies because it has no depth. Some falls among the thorns, and it starts to grow, but quickly gets choked out because it's crowded, competing for space with everything around it. But the seed that falls on the good ground, it survives, produces, not because its circumstances were easier, but because its roots went deep. The question isn't whether the heat is coming, or if weeds threaten to choke, or if the noise is going to try to drown you out. The question is, are your roots planted deeply enough in the right ground to survive it when they do? I want to give you 3 roots today. 3 things that when they go deep will plant you so firmly in the right ground that your why cannot be shaken. Not by the heat, not by the weeds, and not by the noise. Because when you know who you are in God, your why has a foundation that cannot be moved. So root 1 is identity. The shakeable identity is built on history, on performance, on what you've been through, and what others have said about you. The unshakable identity is built on what God declared about you before any of that happened, and regardless of what is still coming. The woman who knows who she is in God does not need circumstances to cooperate for her to stand firm because she is already planted deeply. Root 2 is worth. Now, this one is going to land differently for the woman who has been holding everything together. So I need you to stay with me. Many of the most capable women in any room are the most disconnected from their own worth. They produce to prove. They perform to earn attention, recognition, validation, even love. They keep going because resting feels dangerous, because slowing down feels like failure, because somewhere along the way, they learned that their value was contingent on their output. That is not strength. That is a wound driving a calendar. And when worth is settled, when you stop trying to earn what God already gave you, you stop building from fear and you start building from purpose. The fruit is completely different, and so is the energy it takes to produce it. Root 3, belief. And this might be the most important one because you do not live out what you say you believe. You live out what you actually believe. Your actions are your lived beliefs, every single one. How you show up at your home, in your relationships, in the quiet. That is a real-time report of what you believe is true about yourself, about God, and about what's possible for you. Because faith is not a feeling. Faith is living like you believe God is telling the truth, even when the circumstances haven't caught up yet. If you want to know what you actually believe, don't look at your prayers. Look at your behavior. I want to pause here and ask you something. And this is not rhetorical. Be honest with yourself right now. What is your identity rooted in? Is it rooted in what you've built? In what you've survived? In what people say about you or what they used to say? In your performance, your output, your role as a mother, your title, your strength, your children? Or is it rooted in what God declared about you before any of that ever existed? Here is what becomes possible when you stop trying to build an identity in soil that was never designed to hold you, and you plant yourself in the one who is the only source of truth that cannot be changed. Here's what it looks like when these roots go deep. Healthy roots are firmly planted in truth, not in performance, not in history, not in other people's opinions. Only one person's opinion has the actual power to shape you, and it isn't theirs. Healthy roots are consistently nourished, not just in the good seasons, but as a daily practice, in the rest, the quiet, the moments that feel lonely, when you have no one to call, nowhere to turn. Who do you reach for? If it isn't God, you cannot nourish these roots. The woman who can only be nourished by noise, by output, by someone else's validation, she is one hard season away from running dry. Healthy roots are able to withstand, not because the storm doesn't come, but because the roots go deeper than the storm can uproot. There's something remarkable about trees that grow in unlikely environments, on the edge of cliffs, in cracked rock, in places where nothing should survive. Their strength doesn't come from favorable conditions. It comes from the depth of their root system. And the storms are what deepen the roots that are planted on good ground. Here's what that produces. You stop making decisions from fear and start making them from faith, from the confidence that you are moving not in your own strength, but in the strength of the one who calls you by name. You stop shrinking in spaces you were designed to occupy. You stop performing for people whose opinions were never meant to define you. You stop chasing a false version of yourself, the one built from your history, your losses, what others said about you. That is not a pursuit. That is a homecoming. You move without anyone's permission, cooperation, approval, or support. Not because you are domineering, but because you are rooted. You surrender the storm entirely to Him. You can rest. You can pause. You can reset. But you are never defeated because it isn't you doing the work. Romans 8:31 says, if God is for us, who can be against us? Not who can inconvenience us, not who can challenge us, not who can disappoint us or leave us or speak about us. Who can be against us? That is not a motivational quote. That is a legal declaration about whose side the outcome is already on. God declared who you were before your parents had the chance to wound you, before your ex had the chance to define you, before your failures had the chance to convince you. Before this world had the chance to hand you an identity you were never meant to carry. He spoke first. Psalm 139 tells us, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. Which means the false identity, the one built on performance, on history, on what others said, was never the original. It was always the counterfeit. And the woman who knows that, the woman who has gone looking for what God actually said and planted herself there, she cannot be shaken by what she's been through or by what comes. Because what God declares, no storm, no loss, no person, and no version of your past has the authority to overturn that version of yourself you have been chasing. The one who is deeply rooted, finally free, finally at peace, finally enough. She was never ahead of you. She has never been out of reach. She has just been buried under a false identity she was never meant to carry. You do not need to do more. You need to be more rooted. The woman who knows who she is in God cannot be shaken by what she's been through or by what comes. It's time to find out where your roots are planted. This is the work that I do in my coaching. Not to be the answer, but to point you to the one who is. To remind you that you have access to everything you truly desire and to help you begin living like it today. If that conversation is one you are ready to have, you can apply for coaching at coachkatieann.com/call. And next week, we are going to take this even further because once you know where your roots are planted, the next question is what they are producing in the people closest to you. That episode is for every mother who has ever wondered what her children are really learning from watching her life. You do not want to miss it. If you are not already subscribed to Beyond Believing, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss it. And if this episode spoke to something you have been carrying, share it with a woman who needs to hear it today. I'll see you then.